is dependable. For decades she had been the one holding her family together, quietly giving, rarely asking. She had pulled money from her retirement fund to help her son Michael buy a house, watched his children so he and his wife Stephanie could have nights out, and filled her freezer with casseroles to carry over when life got busy for them. But none of that history mattered on the evening her heart shifted forever. She stood at the wooden gate that led into her son's backyard, a warm peach cobbler balanced in her hands. The voices on the other side floated sharp and clear. One voice belonged to Stephanie. It carried a laugh that was more of a slice than a sound. Frances heard the words, "Why is she even still alive?" A sentence so casual, yet so cruel it landed like a blade against bone. She froze, not because she was unsure of what she heard, but because she knew exactly what it meant. She was no longer family to them. She was an obligation, a burden, a ghost still walking. Frances did not drop the dish. Her hands were steady, her back straight. She pushed the gate open and walked in, past the string lights, past the chatter, past faces that turned toward each other but not toward her. She set the cobbler on the table without ceremony and found a seat at the far end. The chair creaked, her spine ached, but she refused to hunch. Around her, laughter moved like a current she could not enter. Michael raised a glass of beer at one point and said, "To family." Every voice joined him, every glass clinked. But not one glance, not one nod, not one acknowledgement came her way. That was the beginning. The moment Frances Malone stopped being invisible to herself. The moment she decided that silence had already taken too much. The backyard smelled of grilled meat and citronella candles, the kind of mix that usually marked summer gatherings. Children ran across the grass, chasing one another with paper cups of soda, their sneakers pounding against the worn deck boards. Frances watched them pass by 3 separate times, not one pausing to wave or call her grandma. Their laughter skipped right over her, as if she were a piece of lawn furniture, background to the fun. The peach cobbler cooled untouched. No one asked for a slice, no one lifted the plastic wrap. Frances folded her hands in her lap, the same way she used to during church sermons when she needed to still her body even though her mind raced. Her son Michael lifted his voice again to make a toast to family. The words should have rung with warmth, but they struck her like hollow bells. He did not look at her, not even once. The people around him raised their drinks and smiled, but Frances sat at the far end with nothing to lift but silence. Stephanie eventually approached. She wore the smile she saved for photographs, tight and practiced. "Did you want a plate?" she asked, not unkind but not sincere either. Frances shook her head. "I am fine." Stephanie nodded too quickly and walked away before another word could pass. Frances remained, the hum of the crowd moving around her like she was a stone in a river, unshaped by the flow. When the evening wound down, Frances rose without being asked. She stacked plates, gathered napkins, and wiped sticky spills from the table with a damp towel. It was the same kind of care she had always given, invisible but steady. Yet no thank yous reached her ears. By the time the last light dimmed, she picked up her empty dish, still faintly warm from the day, and slipped through the gate. She left not in anger, not in sorrow, but with something sharper than both a decision settling quietly inside her bones. That night, Frances sat at her kitchen table, the same table where Michael once did his homework, legs too long for the small chair, pencils scattered everywhere. She brewed a single cup of coffee in her smallest pot and let the quiet settle around her. The cobbler dish had been washed, dried, and placed back in the cabinet, as if nothing unusual had happened, but inside she felt the sharp edge of memory pressing hard. 15 years earlier, when Michael and Stephanie were just starting out, Frances had made a choice. She withdrew $40,000 from her retirement account, a sum she had built carefully, dollar by dollar across decades of work. She told them, "This is just to help you get started, no strings attached." At the time, her heart swelled with pride. She believed she was investing in a family, in love, in a legacy that would circle back and hold her when she grew older. But now that gift had turned invisible, erased in the minds of those who benefited most. The house Michael and Stephanie lived in, the one filled with laughter that excluded her, existed because she had emptied her own pockets. And yet, at their table, there was no place for her. The realization stung with more power than Stephanie's careless words. It was not just about being forgotten at a party, it was about being erased from her own history. Frances knew she was not the only one who had walked this road. Parents everywhere had stories of sacrifices no one remembered, tuition bills quietly paid, weddings financed, down payments given with nothing expected in return. They did it for love, believing gratitude would come naturally. But gratitude often faded, replaced by convenience. Frances now carried that truth like a stone in her chest. She pushed aside the unopened stack of mail on the counter. The electricity bill had Michael's name on it, a bitter reminder that her money had laid the foundation. She did not open it. Not yet. Instead, she leaned back, breathing deeply. What once felt like love now tasted like loss. And she realized, painfully but clearly, that her devotion had been expensive in more ways than one. By the next morning, Frances's mind had settled into a rare kind of clarity. She opened the old filing cabinet in her hallway, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar, and pulled out the folder marked house. Inside were the documents she had almost forgotten she kept, the purchase agreement, the deed, and even the letter she had written to Michael when she handed over the money. Her handwriting stared back at her. "Because you are my son, I do this with no expectation of repayment." Reading those words now made her chest tighten. What once felt generous now felt like a wound she had written with her own pen. That evening she called an old acquaintance, Lena Morgan, a sharp-minded woman she had met years ago at a community bridge game. Lena had worked in probat law before retiring, and Frances knew she could offer the clarity she needed. Without much explanation, Frances asked, "Can I bring you some documents?" Lena's answer came without hesitation. "Come by tomorrow. Bring everything." Frances ironed her slacks that night, polished her shoes, and pulled her best coat from the closet, even though the weather was warm. She knew this was not just an errand, it was a beginning. When you are about to change the shape of your life, she thought, you wear something with buttons. Lena's house smelled of lemon cleaner and peppermint tea. She welcomed Frances at the table, spread out the documents, and skimmed with practiced eyes. After a few minutes, Lena looked up. "No written expectations, no shared title. You gifted it, Frances." "It is theirs." Frances nodded, the truth heavy but no longer surprising. "I know," she said. "But does that mean I am powerless?" Lena leaned back. "Not at all. You cannot take back the house, but you can make sure they do not get anything else." The words struck deep, like the sound of a lock turning in the right direction. Frances realized she still had choices. She could protect her savings, her will, her power of attorney. She could draw lines where none had existed before. For the first time in years, she felt aligned rather than erased. She folded Lena's checklist and slipped it into her purse, her spine straighter than it had been in a long while. The decision was made. Frances Malone would no longer be invisible, not even to herself. The following week became a series of deliberate steps, each one a quiet reclamation. Frances began with the papers Lena had highlighted. The first task was to revoke the durable power of attorney that once gave Michael the right to make decisions on her behalf. She remembered how quickly he had signed the form years earlier, barely reading the details, treating it like another chore. Now she placed the document in front of Lena again, but this time to dissolve it. Lena slid the revocation across the desk, and Frances signed her name in strokes that were firm, steady, unshaken. Next came the will. Frances removed Michael not only as executor but also as a beneficiary altogether. "He has a house, a career, a family," she explained. "He has made clear what he values." Lena did not argue. Instead, she asked who should take his place. Frances answered honestly, "I do not know yet. Maybe a professional, someone who will not treat me like an afterthought." It was a practical answer, but beneath it lived something deeper, the refusal to let indifference govern her final legacy. The following morning, Frances scheduled a locksmith. A young man arrived in a van, carrying tools in polite silence. He replaced the locks on both the front and back doors, handed her a small set of new keys, and wished her a good day. Frances divided the keys into 4, one for her purse, one for a fireproof box, one for her trusted neighbor, and one tucked away in her safety deposit box. For the first time in years, she slept without waking at every sound, the house secure not because Michael watched over it, but because she had secured it herself. At the bank, she asked to see a manager. The woman behind the desk reviewed Frances's accounts and confirmed that Michael was listed as a co-signer. Frances looked her in the eye and said, "Remove him completely. Cancel the card, reissue everything in my name alone." The manager typed swiftly, pausing only once to ask, "Are you certain?" Frances answered, "I have never been more certain." Each act was not revenge. It was repair. It was the slow, careful stitching of a fabric that had been torn by years of dismissal. And with every form signed, every lock turned, every account updated, Frances felt the weight lift. She was not waiting to be acknowledged anymore. She was choosing herself, one deliberate decision at a time. It did not take long for Michael to notice the changes. When his calls stopped going through, he drove to the house. Frances heard the car before she saw him, the familiar rumble settling into her driveway. He knocked twice, then called through the door, "Mom, please. You changed the locks. You blocked my number. I just want to talk." Frances sat on the couch, hands folded in her lap. For years she had longed to hear urgency in his voice. Now that it was there, she did not open the door. After a long silence, his footsteps retreated, the car pulling away. She did not follow. A few days later, Stephanie arrived. She did not knock timidly. She stepped inside as though the old narrative still belonged to her. Frances met her in the living room, her back straight, her chin lifted. "This is getting out of hand," Stephanie began. "You have blocked Michael. You have changed accounts. Ruby is sneaking around to call you. And now I hear you are moving." Frances answered calmly, "All true." Stephanie blinked, caught off guard by the lack of argument. "We are your family," she pressed, putting weight on the word like it was a claim of ownership. "You cannot erase us because of a bad day." Frances studied her carefully. It was not one bad day. It was years of being tolerated instead of welcomed. Stephanie's jaw tightened. "We never asked you for anything." Frances's reply was quiet but sharp. "That is the problem. You never asked. You only expected." The room went still. Stephanie's voice rose. "Michael is a good man. He does not deserve this." Frances's reply landed like stone on water. "Good men do not laugh when someone wonders why their mother is still alive." The words hit harder than she expected. Stephanie's composure cracked for a moment, but she masked it quickly. "You are exaggerating. You have always been difficult." Frances felt a strange smile form, not from amusement, but from recognition. Difficult is the word people use when a woman stops handing over her silence. Stephanie's eyes darted toward the boxes stacked neatly by the door. "You are really doing this, aren't you?" Frances nodded once. "Yes, I am." And for the first time in a long time, she realized she was not apologizing for it. The conversation ended there, not with a slam, but with the door closed gently, firmly, finally. The call came on a quiet Sunday evening. Frances nearly ignored the unknown number, but something nudged her to answer. A small, hesitant voice spoke. "Hi, Grandma. Is this still your number?" It was Emily, her 16-year-old granddaughter. Frances felt her chest tighten, not with anger but with something gentler recognition. "Yes, Emily, it is." There was a pause, followed by a rush of words. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. Sorry for not talking to you at the library. Sorry for pretending I didn't see you at the store. Sorry for laughing when Mom made that comment in the backyard. It wasn't funny. I just wanted to belong." Frances closed her eyes. She heard the truth under the apology. Emily was still a child, caught in the pull of loyalty and survival. "You wanted to belong," Frances finished for her. Emily whispered, "Yes." For a long moment, Frances did not respond. The old version of herself would have rushed to soothe, to say it was all right, but she had learned the danger of easy forgiveness. Instead, she said softly, "Thank you for calling." Emily asked, "Can I see you?" "Just me." Frances thought of the empty pie drawer, the years of ignored birthday gifts, the weight of silence. But she also thought of the little girl who once clutched her hand crossing icy sidewalks. "All right," she said. "Come tomorrow after school, just you." The next afternoon Emily arrived, her hoodie 2 sizes too big, shoelaces untied, eyes rimmed with the fragile honesty of a teenager. Frances opened the door before she could knock twice. Inside, they sat at the kitchen table. Frances poured tea. Emily picked at warm slices of banana bread. "Mom says you've gone crazy," Emily murmured. "That you're cutting us out." Frances shook her head gently. "I'm not cutting. I'm choosing. There's a difference." Emily nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't hate you. I think I just copied how they acted, and I didn't question it until I started missing you." The words folded something inside Frances back into place. She reached across the table, not to erase the past, but to open a door just wide enough for one granddaughter who had chosen to knock with care. Within weeks, Frances put the final pieces of her plan in motion. She met with a real estate attorney, signed the last stack of forms, and placed the house on the market. The home that once echoed with Michael's laughter, the one where birthdays were celebrated and holidays marked, would no longer bind her. It sold faster than she expected. An older couple bought it, drawn to its quiet street and mature trees. Frances felt no need for a final walkthrough. She had already said goodbye. With the proceeds, she made a bold choice. Instead of holding the money in accounts Michael once assumed he would inherit, Frances donated it directly to a women's shelter across town, a place she had turned to briefly decades ago when life with her late husband had been harder than she admitted. As she handed over the check, the director's eyes welled with tears. Frances felt no urge to cry. Her giving was no longer about obligation or expectation. It was intention, clear and firm. Her new apartment was modest, a ground-floor unit with south-facing windows and enough space for what truly mattered. No attic full of forgotten boxes, no dining room big enough to seat people who ignored her. Just clean walls, light that streamed in during the afternoons, and silence that belonged solely to her. On the first evening she unpacked 2 things, her kettle and a sketch Emily had drawn. It showed a woman at a chessboard, only 2 pieces left, yet somehow still in position to win. Frances framed it and hung it near the window. When the evening sun caught the pencil strokes, it glowed faintly, almost defiantly. For the first time in years, Frances felt no need to wait for a phone call, a knock, or an invitation that might never come. She was not in exile. She was home, finally, in a place built on her own terms. On the morning of her 73rd birthday, Frances woke without an alarm. There were no balloons, no surprise texts from relatives, no brunch reservations. Instead, there was the gentle light of dawn through clean curtains and the sound of rain somewhere in the distance. She made pancakes, just 2, and ate them with honey and a sliced pear. Then she sat quietly, looking at the photo of her late husband propped on a chair. "Well, we got here, didn't we?" she whispered. At noon, Emily arrived with a bundle of tulips wrapped in paper. "You're not a birthday cake person," she said shyly, "so I brought flowers." Inside her small envelope was a handmade card. Painted on the front were 2 chairs on a porch, one empty, one with a teacup resting on the arm. Inside it read, "Thanks for keeping a seat for me." Frances's throat tightened, but this time it was not from hurt. It was from recognition that love, real love, had found its way back. They shared tea and toast, speaking about school, summer plans, and Emily's new dream of volunteering at the shelter Frances had supported. For once, the conversation was not about fractures or forgiveness. It was simply about life continuing. Later, when the apartment grew quiet again, Frances wrote in her journal, "They once asked why I was still alive. Now I know, to remember my own name, to set my own table, to keep the door open just enough for those who knock with clean hands." And to anyone listening now, if you have ever felt invisible at your own table, remember this: you are allowed to choose yourself. Share this story if you believe someone else needs to hear it, and do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe so we can keep telling the stories that remind